The blood on Delilah Greene's hands was already dried brown when she collapsed onto the hay bales in the abandoned barn, her body shaking with sobs that tore through her chest like wildfire. She had been running for 3 days straight across the Utah desert, her shoes long since worn through, her dress torn and filthy, and the image of her father's lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling of their homestead burned into her mind like a brand. The June heat of 1878 had been merciless. And now, as the sun began to set over Circleville, she found herself in this forgotten structure on the outskirts of town, weeping into her blood-stained palms while her whole world crumbled around her. She did not hear the footsteps approaching, did not sense another presence until a voice, low and steady, broke through her grief. "Madam, you are sitting in the horse's hay, and I reckon you have been there long enough that it is warm where you sit." Delilah's head snapped up, her green eyes wide with terror, as she scrambled backward against the barn wall. Standing in the doorway was a tall man, maybe 25 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His hands were raised slightly, palms out, in a gesture of peace. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, his voice gentler now. "Name is Wade Anderson. I work the ranch that owns this barn. Came to check on the place before nightfall and heard someone crying." He took a cautious step forward, his eyes scanning her torn dress, her bare and bleeding feet, the blood on her hands. "You look like you have been through hell and back." Delilah tried to speak, but only a choked sound emerged. She pressed herself harder against the wall, her whole body trembling. Wade stopped moving, giving her space, and slowly lowered himself to sit on a hay bale across from her, keeping a respectful distance. "How about you catch your breath, and when you are ready, you tell me what happened," he said. "Or you do not tell me at all, but you look like you need water, food, and probably a doctor. I can help with all three if you will let me." The kindness in his voice broke something loose in Delilah's chest. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the dust and grime on her face. "They killed him," she whispered, her voice raw. "They killed my father, and they are going to come looking for me, because I saw everything." Wade's expression darkened. "Who killed your father?" "The Brennan gang." The name came out like poison. "They came to our homestead 3 days ago. My father had been working a claim up in the hills, found silver. Somehow they found out about it. They demanded he tell them where it was, and when he refused..." Her voice broke. "They shot him right in front of me. I hid in the root cellar, but I saw it happen through the floorboards. I saw everything." Wade was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. The Brennan gang was notorious throughout southern Utah, a group of outlaws led by Jack Brennan, who had been terrorizing small settlements and homesteads for the better part of 2 years. The law had been trying to catch them, but they were like smoke, always disappearing into the desert or up into the mountains before anyone could pin them down. "You have been running for 3 days, Wade said, not a question but a statement. "From where?" "About 40 miles northeast of here. Small homestead near Marysvale." Delilah wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing the dirt. "I waited until dark, then I ran. I have been walking and running ever since. I did not know where else to go. My mother died 2 years ago, and we have no other family. It was just me and Papa." Wade stood slowly, careful not to startle her. "First things first, you need water and food. Then we are going to get those feet looked at, because they are bleeding pretty badly. After that, we can figure out what to do about the Brennan gang." He extended his hand toward her. "I give you my word, miss, I will not let anyone hurt you. You are safe here." Delilah stared at his outstretched hand, at the calluses on his palm and the honest look in his gray eyes. She had no reason to trust this stranger, no reason to believe anything he said. But she was exhausted, terrified, and alone in the world. Slowly she reached out and placed her small, blood-stained hand in his larger one. His grip was warm and firm, and when he helped her to her feet, she swayed slightly, dizzy from dehydration and lack of food. Wade steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy now. When was the last time you ate?" 2 days ago, maybe 3. I found some berries, but I did not want to stop long enough to forage properly." Delilah took a shaky breath. "I was too scared they were following me." "Well, they are not here now, and even if they were, they would have to go through me to get to you." Wade guided her toward the barn door, supporting most of her weight as she limped beside him. "My horse is just outside. The main ranch house is about a mile from here. The family I work for, the Mitchells, they are good people. Mrs. Mitchell will help get you cleaned up and fed." The walk to Wade's horse felt like it took an eternity. Delilah's feet screamed with every step, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Wade must have noticed because he stopped, and, with surprising gentleness, simply swept her up into his arms. "I can walk," Delilah protested weakly, but she did not struggle. "I am sure you can, but there is no need to torture yourself," Wade replied. He carried her to where a large bay gelding stood waiting, reins hanging loose. With practiced ease, he lifted Delilah onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist to hold her steady, and despite everything, despite the horror of the past 3 days, Delilah felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time since watching her father die, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to survive this. The ride to the ranch house passed in a blur. Delilah was vaguely aware of Wade's steady presence behind her, of the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them, of the sun finally sinking below the horizon and painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. When they reached the ranch house, a large adobe structure with a wraparound porch, Wade called out as he dismounted. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need some help out here." A woman in her 50s emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She took one look at Delilah, and her eyes widened. "Good Lord, Wade, what happened?" "Long story. She needs food, water, medical attention, and a safe place to stay." Wade reached up and carefully lifted Delilah down from the horse. "Her name is Miss Greene, and she is in trouble." Mrs. Mitchell did not ask any more questions. She simply moved forward and took Delilah's arm, supporting her other side. "Come inside, dear. Let us get you taken care of." The next hour passed in a haze of activity. Mrs. Mitchell helped Delilah out of her ruined dress and into a warm bath, gently washing away 3 days' worth of dirt, blood, and fear. She tended to the cuts and blisters on Delilah's feet, wrapping them in clean bandages, and provided her with a simple cotton nightgown and a thick robe. By the time Delilah was seated at the kitchen table, her hair still damp and hanging loose down her back, she felt almost human again. Wade sat across from her, a cup of coffee in his hands, while Mrs. Mitchell placed a plate of stew and fresh bread in front of Delilah. "Eat slowly," the older woman advised. "Your stomach will not be used to food after going without." Delilah nodded and picked up her spoon with shaking hands. The first bite of stew was like heaven, rich and warm and everything she needed. She forced herself to eat slowly, even though her body screamed for her to devour everything on the plate. Wade watched her quietly, then said, "I told Mrs. Mitchell about the Brennan gang, about what happened to your father." Delilah's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She set the spoon down carefully. "Are you going to turn me over to the law?" "Why would I do that?" Wade looked genuinely confused. "You are the victim here, not the criminal." "Because Jack Brennan has connections. Because he has money and influence and people are scared of him." Delilah's voice was bitter. "Because the sheriff in Marysvale did not do anything when Papa reported threats. He said we were making it up, trying to cause trouble." Mrs. Mitchell made a disgusted sound. "That sheriff is in Brennan's pocket, has been for over a year. Everyone knows it, but no one can prove it." She patted Delilah's shoulder. "You are safe here, child. Mr. Mitchell and Wade will make sure of that." As if summoned by his name, a large man with a graying beard entered the kitchen through the back door. Mr. Mitchell looked to be in his late 50s, with the weathered face of someone who had spent his entire life working under the sun. He nodded to Wade, then looked at Delilah with sharp blue eyes. "Wade filled me in," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Miss Greene, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need. We have a spare room, and my wife will see that you are taken care of. But we need to talk about what comes next." Delilah set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. "What do you mean?" Mr. Mitchell pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "The Brennan gang has been getting bolder. They hit a supply wagon last month, killed 2 men, robbed a bank in Beaver 3 weeks ago. If they killed your father over a silver claim and you are a witness, they will come looking for you. It is only a matter of time." "Then I will leave," Delilah said quickly. "I will not bring that danger to your doorstep. You have been so kind, but I cannot ask you to risk your lives for me." "You are not asking. We are offering." Wade's voice was firm. "Besides, Where would you go? You have no money, no supplies, no horse. You would not make it 2 days on your own out there. Wade is right, Mrs. Mitchell said gently. And more than that, dear, you should not have to face this alone. What happened to your father was evil, and those men need to be brought to justice. How? Delilah's voice cracked. The law will not help. The sheriff is corrupt. What am I supposed to do? There is a federal marshal who comes through Circleville every few months, Mr. Mitchell said. Name is Samuel Cross. He is a good man, honest as they come. He was through here about 6 weeks ago, which means he is due back any time now. If we can get your testimony to him, along with any evidence you have, he can put together a case against Brennan. Delilah shook her head. I do not have any evidence, just what I saw. What about your father's claim? Wade asked. Where is it? If we can find the paperwork, prove that your father had a legitimate claim to that silver, it gives the marshal something concrete to work with. The papers were in the homestead, Delilah said slowly. In Papa's desk, but I do not know if they are still there. The Brennan gang might have burned everything. Or they might have missed them, Wade said. It is worth checking. You are not suggesting we go back there, Mrs. Mitchell said sharply, looking at Wade. Not we. Me. Wade met her gaze steadily. 40 miles on horseback, I can be there and back in 2 days. If the papers are still there, I will find them. That is too dangerous, Delilah protested. What if the gang is still watching the place? Then I will be careful. Wade turned to look at her, and something in his expression made Delilah's breath catch. Miss Greene, those men took your father from you. They took your home, your sense of safety, everything. The least I can do is try to get you some justice. Let me do this. Delilah stared at him, at this stranger who had found her weeping in a barn and had, without hesitation, offered her protection and help. She did not understand why he cared, why he was willing to risk his life for someone he had just met. But looking into his gray eyes, she saw something she had not seen in a long time, genuine goodness. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Wade was quiet for a moment. 5 years ago, my younger sister was killed by outlaws. She was 17, riding home from town, and they stopped her on the road, robbed her, and shot her for the $3 she had in her pocket. His voice was steady, but Delilah could hear the old pain beneath it. I was working a ranch 2 counties over at the time. By the time I got home, she was already buried. The men who did it were never caught. So when I see someone like you, someone who has lost everything to the same kind of evil, I am not going to just stand by and do nothing. I could not help my sister, but maybe I can help you. Delilah felt tears sting her eyes again. I am sorry about your sister. Me too. Wade stood up from the table. Which is why I am going to get those papers and make sure the men who killed your father face justice. You have my word on that. Mr. Mitchell nodded slowly. If you are set on this, take the roan mare. She is faster than your gelding, and take my rifle. I would feel better knowing you are well armed. I will leave at first light, Wade said. Miss Greene, you get some rest. Mrs. Mitchell will take good care of you while I'm gone. Delilah wanted to protest, wanted to tell him not to go, that it was too dangerous, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she just nodded, watching as Wade gave Mr. Mitchell a meaningful look and then headed out of the kitchen. She heard the front door close behind him, and suddenly the room felt colder. Mrs. Mitchell squeezed her shoulder. Finish your stew, dear, then I will show you to your room. You need sleep more than anything right now. That night, Delilah lay in a real bed for the first time in days, clean and warm and safe, but sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, heard the gunshots, felt the terror of hiding in that root cellar. She saw Wade's face too, the determination in his eyes when he had promised to help her. A man she had known for mere hours was riding into danger because of her, and the thought made her stomach twist with guilt and something else, something she could not quite name. She finally drifted off near dawn, and when she woke, the sun was already high in the sky. Delilah dressed in the simple calico dress Mrs. Mitchell had left for her, and made her way downstairs on her still tender feet. She found Mrs. Mitchell in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said, with a warm smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Physically, anyway." Delilah accepted the cup of coffee Mrs. Mitchell poured for her. "Did Wade leave already?" Before dawn, he wanted to get as much writing done as possible in the cooler morning hours. Mrs. Mitchell shaped the dough into a loaf and placed it in a pan. He is a good man, that one. Been working here for 3 years now, and I have never met anyone more honest or hard-working. He sends most of his wages back to his mother in Wyoming. She is getting on in years and cannot work the farm alone anymore. Delilah absorbed this information, adding it to the growing picture she had of Wade Anderson, a man who cared for his aging mother, who had lost his sister to violence, who would ride into danger for a stranger. It seemed almost too good to be true. The day passed slowly. Mrs. Mitchell put Delilah to work, helping with small tasks around the house, saying that keeping busy would help keep her mind off things. Delilah peeled vegetables, mended clothes, and helped feed the chickens. It was simple work, domestic and peaceful, and it did help distract her from the constant worry gnawing at her insides. That evening, Mr. Mitchell came in from checking the cattle and announced that he had posted extra men on watch around the property just in case. "No sense taking chances," he said gruffly. "If the Brennan gang does come sniffing around, we will be ready for them." The second day was harder. Every hour that passed without word from Wade made Delilah more anxious. She kept watching the horizon, looking for any sign of a rider. Mrs. Mitchell tried to keep her occupied, but Delilah found it harder and harder to focus on anything. It was late afternoon when one of the ranch hands came running up to the house, shouting that someone was coming. Delilah's heart leaped into her throat as she rushed to the window, Mr. Mitchell right behind her with his rifle. But it was just a single rider, and as the figure got closer, Delilah recognized the roan mare. Wade was hunched over the saddle, and even from a distance she could tell something was wrong. Mr. Mitchell was out the door in an instant, with Delilah right behind him, despite Mrs. Mitchell's protests. They reached Wade just as he slid off the horse, nearly collapsing. His shirt was torn and stained with blood, and there was a nasty gash across his forehead. "I got them," he said, his voice rough. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather folder, thrusting it into Mr. Mitchell's hands. "The claim papers, everything." "What happened to you?" Delilah demanded, reaching out to steady him. Up close she could see more injuries, bruises forming on his jaw, scrapes on his knuckles, blood soaking through his shirt on his left side. "Ran into 3 of Brennan's men. They were watching the homestead, just like we thought." Wade winced as Mr. Mitchell helped support his other side. "Had to fight my way out? Got the papers first, though. That was what mattered." "You idiot," Delilah said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "You could have been killed, but I was not." Wade managed a weak smile. "And now you have your evidence." Mrs. Mitchell descended on them like a mother hen, ordering the men to get Wade inside immediately. For the second time in as many days, Delilah found herself watching as Mrs. Mitchell played doctor, this time cleaning and bandaging Wade's injuries. The cut on his head was not as bad as it looked, but the wound on his side was deeper, a knife slash that had bled heavily. "You are lucky this is not worse," Mrs. Mitchell scolded as she stitched the wound closed. Wade gritted his teeth but did not make a sound. "You could have bled to death out there." "But I did not," Wade repeated. He looked past Mrs. Mitchell to where Delilah stood in the doorway, watching with her hands clenched together. "I told you I would get those papers. I keep my promises." Delilah felt something crack inside her chest. She crossed the room and, ignoring Mrs. Mitchell's startled look, took Wade's hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for doing this, for risking your life. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Wade's fingers curled around hers, his grip warm despite his injuries. "You do not owe me anything, Miss Greene. Seeing you safe is payment enough." Over the next few days, while Wade recovered from his injuries, Delilah found herself spending more and more time at his bedside. Mrs. Mitchell had put him in a room on the first floor to save him from having to navigate stairs, and Delilah would sit with him for hours, reading aloud from books or just talking. She learned that Wade had grown up on a small ranch in Wyoming, the oldest of 4 children. His father had died when Wade was 15, gored by a bull, leaving Wade to help his mother manage the ranch. His 2 younger brothers had eventually gone off to seek their fortunes elsewhere, one becoming a shopkeeper in Denver, the other joining the cavalry. His sister Emma had been the baby of the family, bright and full of life, until that terrible day on the road. "I left Wyoming after she died," Wade told Delilah one evening, as the sun set outside his window. "Could not stand to be there anymore, seeing her empty chair at the dinner table every night. I worked my way south, taking jobs at different ranches. Ended up here 3 years ago and decided to stay. The Mitchells are good people, and the work is honest. Do you ever go back to visit your mother? Delilah asked. Once a year, usually around Christmas. I send her money every month, and my brothers help out when they can. Wade shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. She keeps telling me I should find a good woman and settle down, give her grandchildren. But I have not met anyone who made me want to stay in one place. The way he looked at her when he said that last part made Delilah's heart skip a beat. She found herself noticing little things about him. The way his hair curled at the nape of his neck, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gentleness of his hands despite the calluses. She noticed how he always made sure she had eaten before he would touch his own food, how he asked about her day and actually listened to her answers, how he never tried to minimize her grief or tell her she should be over it by now. On the 5th day after Wade's return, a rider came to the ranch with news. Federal Marshal Samuel Cross had arrived in Circleville and was staying at the hotel in town. Mr. Mitchell immediately sent word that they needed to speak with him on a matter of urgent importance. Marshal Cross arrived at the ranch the next morning, a tall man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Delilah recounted everything that had happened, from the moment the Brennan gang arrived at her homestead to her flight across the desert. Wade, still recovering but insisting on being present, corroborated her story and provided the claim papers he had risked his life to retrieve. Marshal Cross studied the papers carefully, then looked up at Delilah. "Miss Greene, I want you to understand something. If you testify against Jack Brennan and his gang, you will be putting a target on your back. These are not men who forgive or forget." "They already have a target on my back," Delilah said quietly. "They killed my father, and they will kill me too if they get the chance. At least this way, maybe they will face justice first." The marshal nodded slowly. "All right, I have been tracking the Brennan gang for over a year now. This is the first solid evidence I have had that ties them directly to a murder. With your testimony in these papers, I can get warrants issued. It is going to take some time to track them down, but I will get them." He stood up, tucking the papers into his coat. "In the meantime, Miss Greene, I suggest you stay right here where you have protection. Do not go into town alone. Do not leave the ranch without an armed escort. These men are dangerous." "She is not going anywhere," Wade said firmly. "I will make sure of it." After Marshal Cross left, Delilah felt both relieved and terrified. She had set something in motion now, something that could not be undone. The Brennan gang would be hunted, arrested, brought to trial, and if they found out she was the one who had provided the evidence against them, they would come for her with everything they had. Wade must have seen the fear in her eyes because he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "I meant what I said. I am not going to let anything happen to you." "You keep making promises you might not be able to keep," Delilah said, trying to keep her voice light. "I have kept every promise I have made to you so far, have I not?" Wade smiled at her, and Delilah felt her heart do that strange skip again. As the days turned into weeks, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Wade healed quickly, his natural strength and determination speeding his recovery. Soon he was back to working alongside the other ranch hands, though Mr. Mitchell made sure he did not overdo it. Delilah continued to help Mrs. Mitchell around the house, learning to cook and bake, to preserve vegetables and make soap. It was a simple life, far simpler than the one she had known with her father, but there was something comforting about it. What complicated things was the growing awareness between her and Wade. Delilah could not pinpoint exactly when her gratitude had started shifting into something deeper, something that made her breath catch when he walked into a room, or made her heart race when his hand accidentally brushed against hers. She found herself looking for excuses to be near him, to talk to him, to hear his laugh. And unless she was very much mistaken, he was doing the same. It was Mrs. Mitchell who finally confronted her about it one morning in the kitchen while they were making preserves. "You care for him," the older woman said without preamble. Delilah nearly dropped the jar she was holding. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Mrs. Mitchell gave her a knowing look. "And unless I am blind, which I am not, he cares for you too. Has from the moment he found you in that barn, I would wager." Delilah felt her cheeks heat. "That is ridiculous. He barely knows me." "Sometimes knowing someone has nothing to do with time and everything to do with circumstance." Mrs. Mitchell wiped her hands on her apron. "You have been through something terrible together. He risked his life for you, and you have been at his side while he healed. That creates a bond, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. Even if that were true, Delilah said quietly, what does it matter? My life is a mess. I have no home, no money, no family. The Brennan gang wants me dead. What kind of future could I possibly offer someone? What kind of future could you build together, you mean? Mrs. Mitchell corrected gently. Love is not about what you bring to the table, dear. It is about what you are willing to create together. That conversation stayed with Delilah for days. She found herself watching Wade more closely, trying to decipher his feelings, wondering if Mrs. Mitchell was right. And then one evening, everything changed. It was late July, the air hot and still even after the sun had set. Delilah could not sleep, so she had come outside to sit on the porch, hoping for a breeze. She was surprised to find Wade already there, sitting on the steps and looking up at the stars. Could not sleep either? He asked as she settled beside him, careful to leave a respectable distance between them. Too hot, Delilah said, and too much on my mind, I suppose. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the horses moving in their corral, an owl hooting somewhere in the distance, the soft whisper of wind through the grass. Can I ask you something? Wade said finally. Of course. What are you going to do after all this is over, after the Brennan gang is caught and brought to trial? He turned to look at her, his expression serious. Have you thought about it? Delilah had thought about it, more than she wanted to admit. I suppose I will have to figure out what to do with my father's claim. If there really is silver there, it is mine now. Maybe I could sell it, use the money to start over somewhere. Is that what you want? To start over somewhere else? There was something in Wade's voice that made Delilah's pulse quicken. I do not know, she admitted. A few weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. I would have wanted to get as far away from this place as possible, away from all the memories and the pain. But now... She trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. But now, Wade prompted gently. Delilah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Now, I am not so sure. Being here, on this ranch, with the Mitchells and with you, it has shown me that maybe I do not need to run away. Maybe I can build something new right here. Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Delilah, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make things awkward between us. Her heart was pounding now. What is it? I have feelings for you, Wade said simply. I have tried to ignore them, tried to tell myself it is just the circumstances, that once all this is over and you are safe, these feelings will fade, but they have not. If anything, they have gotten stronger. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense in the moonlight. I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still grieving your father and dealing with everything that has happened, but I could not keep it to myself anymore. You deserve to know the truth. Delilah felt like all the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Wade, You do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I am not asking for any promises or commitments. I just wanted you to know that when all this is over, if you decide you want to stay in this area, I would like the chance to court you properly, to see if what I feel, what I think we both feel, could become something real and lasting. For a moment, Delilah could only stare at him. Then, acting on pure instinct, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a press of lips, but it said everything she could not find words for. When she pulled back, Wade was staring at her with wonder in his eyes. I have feelings for you too, Delilah whispered. I have been trying to fight them because I was scared. Scared of getting hurt again, scared of dragging you into my mess, scared of feeling anything at all after losing Papa. But I cannot fight it anymore. I care about you, Wade. So much it terrifies me. Wade reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands. Then we will be terrified together, he said, and kissed her again. This time it was longer, deeper, full of all the emotion they had both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I am going to keep you safe, he murmured. Whatever it takes, I am going to make sure you get through this. And then, if you will have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Delilah felt tears slide down her cheeks, but for the first time in weeks, they were not tears of grief. I would like that, she whispered back. I would like that very much. They sat together on the porch until the early hours of the morning, talking and kissing and making quiet promises to each other. For the first time since her father's death, Delilah felt something other than fear and grief. She felt hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness, tempered by caution. Wade and Delilah made no secret of their growing relationship, though they kept things proper under Mrs. Mitchell's watchful eye. Wade continued to work the ranch, but whenever he had free time, he spent it with Delilah. They went on chaperoned rides around the property, took walks in the evening, and sat together on the porch talking for hours. In early August, word came from Marshall Cross. He had tracked the Brennan gang to a hideout in the mountains west of Beaver, and had organized a posse to bring them in. 3 days later, another message arrived. The Brennan gang had been captured. Jack Brennan and 4 of his men were in custody, awaiting trial. 2 others had been killed in the confrontation when they had tried to shoot their way out. Delilah felt a weight lift from her shoulders when she heard the news, but it was followed quickly by a new anxiety. "I am going to have to testify at the trial," she said to Wade that evening. "I am going to have to face Jack Brennan in a courtroom and tell everyone what he did." "And I will be right there with you," Wade assured her, "every step of the way." The trial was set for late September in the territorial court in Beaver. In the weeks leading up to it, Delilah tried to prepare herself mentally for what was to come. She knew it would not be easy, knew that reliving her father's death in front of a room full of strangers would be one of the hardest things she had ever done, but she also knew it was necessary. Wade proposed to her on a warm evening in mid-September, under the same stars where they had first confessed their feelings for each other. He did not have a ring yet, he explained, but he could not wait another day without asking her to be his wife. Delilah said yes without hesitation, and when they told the Mitchells, Mrs. Mitchell cried happy tears and immediately began planning a wedding. "After the trial," Delilah said firmly. "I want all this to be behind us before we start our new life together." The trial itself was a nightmare Delilah would never forget. Jack Brennan sat in the defendant's chair, his cold eyes boring into her as she took the stand and recounted everything that had happened. His lawyer tried to discredit her testimony, suggested she had made it all up, that perhaps her father had even been killed by someone else entirely and she was simply looking for revenge. But Marshall Cross had done his job well. He had found the men who had been watching Delilah's homestead, the same men Wade had fought to get the claim papers. Under pressure, one of them had confessed and agreed to testify against Brennan in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial lasted 4 days. In the end, the jury found Jack Brennan and 3 of his men guilty of murder, robbery, and a host of other crimes. They were sentenced to hang. The 4th man, the one who had turned against Brennan, received a prison sentence instead. When the verdict was read, Delilah felt Wade's hand squeeze hers tightly. It was done. Her father's death had been avenged. The men who had destroyed her life were going to pay for their crimes. But more than that, she was free now. Free to move forward, free to build a new life, free to love Wade without the shadow of fear hanging over her. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning at the ranch, with just the Mitchells, a few of the ranch hands, and Marshall Cross as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Mitchell had helped her sew, and Wade wore his Sunday best. The local preacher performed the ceremony under a cottonwood tree, and when he pronounced them man and wife, Wade kissed Delilah like she was the most precious thing in the world. Mr. Mitchell had given them an unusual wedding present, a small piece of land on the far edge of the ranch property, about 40 acres with a creek running through it. "Build yourselves a house," he had said gruffly. "Raise a family. You will always have work here if you want it, Wade, but I figure you two will want a place of your own." They did. Wade and Delilah spent the winter months planning and preparing, and in the spring of 1879, with the help of the other ranch hands, they began building a house. It was modest, just 3 rooms to start, but it was theirs. By summer, they had moved in, and Delilah had never felt more at home. She had also made a decision about her father's silver claim. With Marshall Cross's help, she had sold it to a mining company for a fair price. The money was enough to buy cattle, horses, and equipment to start their own small ranch. Wade continued to work for the Mitchells part-time, but more and more, he focused on building up their own herd, their own future. In January of 1880, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. Wade was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective than usual. Mrs. Mitchell laughed at him and told him to give Delilah some breathing room, but Delilah did not mind. She loved knowing how much he cared, how excited he was about becoming a father. Their son was born in late summer of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Daniel, after Delilah's father. Wade cried when he held his son for the first time, and Delilah fell in love with him all over again, watching him cradle the tiny baby with such tenderness. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, the endless work that came with running a ranch. But there was also joy. There was Daniel's first steps and first words, the pride on Wade's face when their herd grew, the satisfaction of watching their home become more comfortable and established with each passing year. In 1882, Delilah gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, and their little house suddenly felt very full. Wade added on 2 more rooms, and Mrs. Mitchell joked that at this rate, their house would be bigger than the main ranch house before long. Daniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the horses. Rose was adventurous and bold, always getting into mischief, while Lily was quieter, more content to stay close to her mother and help with cooking and sewing. Watching them grow, Delilah sometimes felt overwhelmed by how much her life had changed. It had been 5 years since that terrible night when the Brennan gang had killed her father. 5 years since she had fled across the desert and collapsed weeping in a barn, certain her life was over. And in some ways, it had been. The girl she had been died that night along with her father, but the woman she had become, the woman who had found love and built a family and created a home in this rugged land, she was stronger than that girl had ever been. She had survived the worst things she could imagine and had come out the other side not broken, but tempered, like steel forged in fire. One evening in the summer of 1883, as the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Delilah stood on the porch of their house, watching Wade teach Daniel how to rope a fence post. Rose and Lily were playing nearby, their laughter carried on the warm breeze. From inside, she could hear the pot of stew she had cooking, could smell the bread she had baked that morning. Wade caught her watching and smiled, that same warm, genuine smile that had first made her heart skip a beat 5 years ago. He said something to Daniel, ruffled the boy's hair, and walked over to join her on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "About the night you found me in the barn," Delilah said honestly. "About how I thought my life was over and how wrong I was." Wade pulled her closer. "You know what I remember thinking that night? When I first saw you sitting there in the hay, crying like your heart was broken? What? I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." Wade turned her to face him. "You had been through hell, but you were still fighting, still surviving. I think I started falling in love with you right then, even though I did not realize it at the time." Delilah reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that years of sun and hard work had etched around his eyes. "You saved me that night. In every way a person can be saved." "No," Wade said softly. "We saved each other." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Delilah felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt with their first kiss. Some things, she thought, never changed. Some loves only grew stronger with time. "Mama, Papa, come see." Rose's excited voice interrupted the moment. Their daughter was pointing at something in the grass, probably a bug or a lizard or something equally fascinating to a 3-year-old. Wade laughed and took Delilah's hand. "Come on, our daughter has made a discovery." They walked together toward their children, toward the life they had built, toward a future that once had seemed impossible. And as the sun finished setting and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Delilah sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for Wade, for their children, for this home, for the second chance she had been given. The years continued to pass, each one adding its own joys and challenges. By 1885, their ranch had grown substantially. Wade had proven to have a gift for breeding horses, and their stock was becoming known throughout the territory for quality and temperament. Delilah had taken over managing the financial side of the operation, keeping careful records and making shrewd decisions about when to buy and sell. Daniel, now 5 years old, was already showing signs of becoming an excellent horseman. He was patient with the animals, gentle but firm, and had an intuitive understanding of what they needed. Wade spent hours with him in the corral, teaching him everything he knew. The twins were a force of nature, running wild around the property and keeping Delilah on her toes. Rose had inherited her mother's green eyes and her father's determination, a combination that meant she rarely took no for an answer. Lily was more reserved, but she had a sharp mind and was already learning to read, sitting at the kitchen table and sounding out words from the family Bible. In the spring of that year, Mrs. Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep. The loss hit the entire ranch community hard, but especially Delilah and Wade. Mrs. Mitchell had been like a mother to Delilah, had taken her in and cared for her when she had nowhere else to go. The funeral was well attended, and Mr. Mitchell, devastated by the loss of his wife of 40 years, seemed to age overnight. Wade and Delilah made sure to check on him regularly, bringing the children to visit and helping with tasks around the main ranch house. Mr. Mitchell seemed to find comfort in their company, especially in the laughter of the children. "You two have built something good," he told them one evening. "Martha would have been so proud." In 1886, tragedy struck when a drought hit the region. Water became scarce, and many ranchers lost cattle. Wade and Delilah were luckier than most because of the creek that ran through their property. But it was still a hard year. They had to make difficult decisions about which animals to keep and which to sell, and there were nights when they went to bed exhausted and worried about the future. But they got through it together, supporting each other through the stress and uncertainty. And when the rains finally came again in the fall, they stood together on their porch watching the storm roll in, grateful for every drop. By 1888, Daniel was 8 and the twins were 6. They had added a 4th child to their family, a boy they named William, born in the summer of 1887. Wade had joked that they were going to need to build an even bigger house at this rate, but the truth was they both loved having a full, noisy home. It was around this time that Mr. Mitchell approached them with a proposition. He was getting older, he said, and the ranch was too much for him to handle alone. He wanted to sell them half the ranch, to make them equal partners. The price he quoted was fair, more than fair, and Wade and Delilah spent several long nights discussing whether they could afford it and whether it was the right decision for their family. In the end, they agreed. Using the savings they had carefully built up over the years, plus a loan from the bank in town, they bought into the Mitchell Ranch. It was a big risk, but it was also an incredible opportunity. Suddenly, instead of managing 40 acres, they were responsible for half of a 1,000-acre spread. The workload increased dramatically, but so did the potential for success. Wade hired additional ranch hands, and Delilah took on more responsibility for managing supplies and coordinating sales. There were days when they barely saw each other, except in passing, both of them too busy with the endless demands of the ranch. But no matter how busy they got, they made sure to have dinner together as a family every night. It was their sacred time, when they would sit around the table, share their day, and reconnect. The children would chatter about their adventures, Wade would discuss ranch business, and Delilah would share stories or news from town. In 1890, on their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Delilah with a ring. Not an engagement ring, since they had married without one, but an anniversary ring with a small diamond. "I have been saving up for this for 2 years," he admitted as he slipped it on her finger. "I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that shows the world how much you mean to me," Delilah cried, overwhelmed by the gesture. The ring was lovely, but what really touched her was knowing that Wade, practical and focused on building their future, had set aside money for something purely sentimental. "I love you," she told him, "more today than the day we married, and I will love you even more tomorrow." That same year, Mr. Mitchell passed away. Unlike his wife's peaceful death, his came suddenly, a heart attack while he was out checking on the cattle. Wade found him and brought him home, but there was nothing to be done. The old man was buried next to his wife, and according to his will, his half of the ranch passed to Wade and Delilah. They were now the sole owners of the Mitchell Ranch. It was a bittersweet moment. The ranch represented everything they had worked for, but it had come at the cost of losing someone they both cared about deeply. Delilah suggested they keep the Mitchell name for the ranch as a way of honoring the couple who had given them their start, and Wade agreed. The children were growing up fast. Daniel, at 10, was already doing the work of a man, helping Wade with the harder tasks around the ranch. The twins were developing their own distinct personalities and interests. Rose had become fascinated with the business side of ranching and would pore over Delilah's ledgers, asking questions about prices and profits. Lily had discovered a talent for healing and spent time with the ranch's livestock, nursing sick animals back to health with a patience and gentleness that amazed everyone. William, at 3, was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by his older siblings. He followed Daniel around like a shadow, determined to do everything his big brother did. In 1892, Delilah became pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. She was 31 now, and they had assumed their family was complete. But when a daughter was born in early 1893, healthy and perfect, they welcomed her with joy. They named her Emma, after Wade's sister, and the name felt like a blessing, a way of bringing Wade's lost sibling into their family. As Emma grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Wade's reputation as a horseman had spread throughout the territory, and they regularly had buyers coming from as far away as Colorado and Wyoming to purchase their stock. Delilah's careful management had ensured they had enough savings to weather bad years and invest in improvements during good ones. Daniel was now a teenager, tall and strong and reliable. He had started showing interest in a girl in town, the daughter of the general store owner, and Wade and Delilah had exchanged knowing looks. It seemed like just yesterday he had been a baby in Delilah's arms, and now he was becoming a man. The twins were 10 and showing signs of the women they would become. Rose announced that she wanted to go to normal school and become a teacher, while Lily said she wanted to study veterinary medicine. Wade and Delilah discussed it privately and agreed that if their daughters wanted education beyond what the local school could provide, they would find a way to make it happen. William, at 6, was proving to be the most adventurous of all their children, constantly getting into scrapes and keeping everyone on their toes. And little Emma, at 2, was a happy, sunny child who seemed to bring light wherever she went. One evening in the summer of 1895, Delilah sat on the porch watching the sun set, much as she had done countless times over the years. Wade joined her, settling into the chair beside hers with a satisfied sigh. "Long day?" Delilah asked. "Long but good. We sold that string of horses to the buyer from Denver. Got an excellent price, too." Wade reached over and took her hand. "Sometimes I have to stop and remind myself that this is real, that we built all this." "We did," Delilah agreed. "Together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear their children playing, William's laughter and Emma's delighted squeals mixing with the older kids' voices. "Do you ever think about that night?" Wade asked quietly. "The night I found you in the barn?" "Sometimes," Delilah admitted. "Usually when I am feeling particularly grateful for everything we have. It seems impossible now, that so much good could have come from something so terrible." "Your father would be proud of you," Wade said, "of the woman you have become, of the family you have built, of everything you have accomplished." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. She still missed her father, probably always would, but the grief had softened over the years into something bittersweet. "I hope so. I like to think he is watching over us, that he knows how happy I am." "I am sure he does." Wade brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And I am sure he is grateful that I found you that night, that I was in the right place at the right time to help." "You did not just help me, Wade. You gave me a whole new life. You gave me love and family and purpose. You gave me everything." Delilah leaned over and kissed him. "And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Wade and Delilah remained on the porch, hands clasped, watching over the land they had built together and the family they had created. The past was behind them, full of both pain and triumph. The future stretched out before them, unknown but filled with promise. And the present, this moment right here with the man she loved and the life they had made, was more than Delilah had ever dreamed possible that terrible night when she had collapsed weeping in a barn and a cowboy had offered her kindness. Sometimes, she reflected, the worst moments of your life could lead to the best ones. Sometimes, in the depths of despair, hope was waiting to be found. And sometimes, all it took was one person willing to see your pain, to offer help without expecting anything in return, to change everything. Wade had been that person for her, and she had become that for him as well, helping him heal from the loss of his sister, giving him a family to love and cherish. They had saved each other, just as he had said all those years ago, and they would continue to do so, every day for the rest of their lives. The years continued their steady march forward. By 1900, the new century had arrived, bringing with it changes both large and small. The railroad had finally reached Circleville, making it easier to transport cattle and horses to distant markets. The town itself had grown, adding new shops and even a small bank. Daniel, now 20 years old, had married his sweetheart Mary and built a house on the far side of the ranch property. He and Wade worked side by side every day, and it filled Wade with pride to see his son grown into such a capable, honorable man. Mary was pregnant with their first child, which would make Wade and Delilah grandparents, a fact that made them both feel simultaneously old and blessed. Rose had indeed gone off to normal school in Salt Lake City and returned with teaching credentials. She now taught at the Circleville School, beloved by her students and respected by their parents. At 18, she had several young men courting her, but she seemed in no hurry to settle down, preferring to focus on her career. Lily, also 18, had done something truly remarkable. With financial help from her parents and sheer determination, she had managed to gain acceptance to an agricultural college in Colorado, where they offered courses in animal husbandry and veterinary medicine. It was almost unheard of for a woman to pursue such education. But Lily had never let that stop her. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of enthusiasm for what she was learning. William, at 13, was shaping up to be an excellent cattleman. He had his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business, a combination that Wade predicted would serve him well. He was also showing interest in the new technologies starting to make their way west, always reading about steam engines and the latest agricultural equipment. Emma, at 7, was the darling of the family. Bright and curious, she spent her days following Delilah around, learning to cook and sew and manage a household. But she also loved being outdoors, riding her pony and helping with the animals. She had not yet decided what she wanted to be when she grew up, but Delilah suspected it would be something that allowed her to combine her love of home with her love of adventure. In May of 1900, Mary gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Daniel and Mary named him Wade, after his grandfather. And when the older Wade first held his grandson, Delilah saw tears in her husband's eyes. "Never thought I would see this day," Wade admitted later that night as they lay in bed. "Holding my grandson, it makes everything feel complete somehow." "We have been blessed," Delilah agreed, "more than we probably deserve." "You deserve every happiness," Wade said firmly, turning to look at her in the moonlight streaming through their window. "After everything you went through, everything you survived, you deserve all of this and more." Delilah reached out and touched his face, feeling the lines that age had added, the gray that now streaked his dark hair. They were both in their early 40s now, no longer young but not yet old. They had lived a lifetime together in the 22 years since that night in the barn. "Do you know what I think about sometimes?" Delilah said softly. "I think about what you said to me that night, about how it was warm where I sat because I had been there long enough." "I remember," Wade said. "At the time, I was so deep in my grief and fear that I barely registered the words. But later, I realized what you were really saying. You were telling me that even in the worst moment of my life, I was still alive, still present, still capable of making an impression on the world, even if it was just warming a pile of hay." Delilah smiled. "It was such a simple observation, but it contained so much hope. It was like you were saying, you are still here, you still matter, your presence makes a difference." "I suppose I was," Wade said thoughtfully, "though I am not sure I was being that philosophical at the time. I think I was just trying to get you to talk, to engage with the world instead of being lost in your pain." "Well, it worked, and in a strange way, it set the tone for everything that came after. You showed me that even in darkness, there is warmth. Even in grief, there is hope. Even when you think your life is over, there are new beginnings waiting." Delilah leaned in and kissed him softly. "You showed me all of that just by being you, kind and decent and steady. You were my warm place in the cold world, Wade Anderson. You still are." Wade pulled her close, holding her tight. "And you are mine, always have been, always will be." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the love they had built over more than 2 decades together. The following years brought more changes. Daniel and Mary had 2 more children, daughters they named Grace and Hope. Rose finally accepted a proposal from a young lawyer who had moved to Circleville to open a practice. Their wedding in 1902 was the social event of the season, with half the town in attendance. Lily returned from Colorado in 1903 with her credentials and promptly set up practice as a veterinarian, one of the first women in the territory to do so. She faced skepticism from some of the older ranchers, but her skill and dedication quickly won them over. She worked primarily with large animals, traveling to different ranches to treat sick or injured livestock. William, at 16, was already being consulted by Wade on major ranch decisions. He had a gift for looking at a situation from all angles and finding solutions that others might miss. Delilah predicted he would end up running the ranch one day when Wade was ready to slow down. Emma, at 10, had surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with drawing and painting. She filled sketchbook after sketchbook with pictures of the ranch, the animals, and her family. Delilah had some of her best pieces framed and hung around the house, amazed at the talent her youngest daughter possessed. In the spring of 1905, Wade's mother passed away in Wyoming. She was 83 and had lived a long, full life, but Wade still took her death hard. He traveled north for the funeral, taking Daniel and William with him. When he returned a week later, he seemed older somehow, quieter. "She was proud of us," he told Delilah that night, "of what we built, of our family. She said she knew I would be all right after Emma died because I was strong, but she said she did not realize I would be happy. That was your doing," she told me. "You made me happy again." "We made each other happy," Delilah corrected gently. "That is how love works. It is not one person rescuing the other. It is two people choosing each other every day, building something together." "Wise words from a wise woman," Wade said with a small smile. "How did I get so lucky?" "You walked into a barn at exactly the right moment," Delilah reminded him. "And you chose kindness instead of indifference. Everything else followed from that choice." As 1905 turned into 1906 and beyond, life on the ranch continued its rhythms. There were good years and bad years, times of plenty and times of hardship. But through it all, Wade and Delilah faced everything together, supported by their children and grandchildren and the community they had built. In 1910, on their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a surprise party for them. The entire ranch turned out, along with friends from town and neighboring ranches. There was food and music and dancing, and as Delilah waltzed with Wade under the stars, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude. 25 years, she murmured. "It feels like a lifetime, and like no time at all." "The best 25 years of my life," Wade said, "and if I am lucky, we will have 25 more." They did not quite get 25 more years, but they came close. Wade passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1933 at the age of 80. He had lived to see all of his children grown and successful, had known 15 grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. He had built a ranch that would support his family for generations to come, and most importantly, he had spent 55 years loving and being loved by Delilah. Delilah lived for another 5 years after Wade's death, staying active and involved in the ranch until the very end. She was surrounded by family when she passed in 1938, just a month shy of her 77th birthday. At her funeral, Daniel, now 58 years old and gray-haired himself, told the story his mother had told him many times over the years. The story of a young woman fleeing from tragedy who had collapsed weeping in a barn. The story of a cowboy who had found her there and had offered her kindness and hope. The story of how a simple observation about warmth had sparked a conversation that had changed two lives forever. "My parents built something remarkable," Daniel told the assembled crowd. "Not just this ranch, though that is certainly an achievement. They built a love that lasted over half a century, that produced 5 children and countless descendants. They built a partnership based on mutual respect and support. They built a life that honored both the pain of the past and the promise of the future." He paused, looking at the faces of his siblings, his own children and grandchildren, all the people whose existence traced back to that night in 1878, when Wade had walked into a barn and found his future. "The thing I remember most about my parents," Daniel continued, "was the way they looked at each other. Even after 50 years of marriage, even when they were old and gray, they still looked at each other like they were the most important person in the world. That is the real legacy they left us, not the land or the money or the ranch. It is the example of what love can be when two people commit to it completely. That is what I hope we all remember and try to emulate in our own lives." As the mourners dispersed and the family began the process of settling Delilah's affairs, they found something in her personal effects that made them all pause. It was a small wooden box, carefully preserved, containing a few items from those early days. There was the claim deed to her father's silver mine, a faded photograph of Daniel Greene, taken not long before his death, a dried wildflower that Wade had picked for her on one of their early walks together. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a piece of hay, just a single piece of dried hay, brittle with age but carefully preserved. Attached to it was a note in Delilah's handwriting. From the barn where he found me. From the moment my new life began. Never forget that even in our darkest moments, there is always hope. Rose, who found the box, read the note aloud to her siblings, and they all stood in silence for a moment, honoring their parents' memory. Then Emma, the youngest, spoke up. "We should keep this," she said. "Keep the box and everything in it. Pass it down through the family so that everyone who comes after knows the story, knows where we came from and what it took to build all of this." Everyone agreed. The box became a family heirloom, passed down through the generations along with the story of Wade and Delilah. Their descendants spread out across the West, but they all carried with them the knowledge of those two people who had found each other in a barn on a summer evening in 1878 and had built something extraordinary out of tragedy and hope. The ranch itself remained in the family, passed down from generation to generation. The original house that Wade and Delilah had built was preserved as a sort of museum, kept exactly as it had been when they lived there. Visitors to the ranch, whether family or friends, always made a point of stopping by that house, of standing in the rooms where 5 children had been raised, where countless memories had been made, where love had flourished for over 50 years. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the sun was setting and the air was still warm, people swore they could feel something in that house. A presence, maybe, or just a lingering sense of peace and contentment, the warmth of lives well lived, the enduring power of love that had started with a simple act of kindness and had blossomed into something that touched generations. The barn where Wade first found Delilah had long since fallen down, returned to the earth from which it had been built. But its memory lived on in the stories passed down through the family. It had been the cradle of their dynasty, the place where everything had begun. From that moment of deepest despair had come the greatest joy. From death had come life. From loneliness had come love. It was a story worth remembering, worth telling, worth honoring. And every member of the family who heard it understood the fundamental truth at its heart, that kindness matters, that hope is never truly lost, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the simplest observations contain the deepest truths. Then it is warm where you sit. Those words, spoken by a cowboy to a weeping stranger so many years ago, had become more than just an observation. They had become a philosophy, a reminder that even in the coldest moments of life, there is warmth to be found, that our presence in the world matters, that we leave an impression, that we have the power to create heat and light even in the darkest times. Wade and Delilah had understood that truth and had lived it every day of their lives together. They had taken the warmth they found in each other and spread it outward, creating a family, a home, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. To be loved, to love in return, and to leave the world a warmer place than they found it. Wade and Delilah had done exactly that, and their descendants would carry that warmth forward for generations to come, a living testament to the power of love and the importance of kindness. The story that had begun in tragedy had ended in triumph, a long life well lived, and a love that had stood the test of time. It was the best possible ending, the kind that gave meaning to all the pain that had come before. And whenever their descendants gathered, whether for celebrations or sorrows, someone would always tell the story again, ensuring that Wade and Delilah would never truly be gone. They would live on in the memories and hearts of everyone who came after, proof that love really could conquer all, that hope never died, and that sometimes the warmest places were found in the coldest moments. That was the legacy of the cowboy and the woman he found weeping in the barn, and it was a legacy that would never fade.